In this video I'm going to be showing you how to paint Peter Rabbit on a rock. Hi everyone, welcome to Ellie Holmes Fine Art. I'm Laurie, and as you can probably tell as I carry on talking, I'm from the Black Country in England, just to take the Hollywood shine off things. For all the avid rock painters and rock hunters out there, I'm going to be showing you, among other things, how to paint a variety of animals and characters on rocks. This week I'm going to be showing you how to paint Peter Rabbit. I thought it'd be a good subject matter in light of the new film and it being Easter. Okay, this is a completely ordinary rock that I just found on a walk out. All the treatment it's had is just a wash off under the tap with soap and water and then left to dry in front of the fire. As you can see, I've already drawn out the subject in pencil. I didn't do that under the camera because it's fairly hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by painting his fur. For his fur I'm going to be using the colours Unbleached Titanium, Raw Sienna and Burnt Umber. But for the base coat of his fur, just to give you a base to work from, I'm going to be using the Unbleached Titanium. I'm just going to start here, but always use quite flickering movements when you're painting fur, as it's good for texture. And actually, if you use an older brush, like this one, this is an old brush which I use for dotting and flicking and whatnot, because with an old brush the frayed end actually lends to the fur texture as well. If you use your new fine-ended brush, you'll find that the rock frays that pretty quickly, and you'll need to preserve your finer tipped brush for adding detail later on. Okay, now I'm just going to fast forward through this, otherwise you're going to be here for a long time. So now we've got our base coat in, we can start building up the fur texture. Just as a side note, always mind your water content in your paint. Never load your brush too much with water, because the rock surface of course is not very absorbent and it's going to go everywhere and take a long time to dry. If you have a greater paint content to water content on your brush, then your paint's going to dry pretty fast on the rock and you can go straight to building up your layers a lot faster. So for the next colour layer I'm just going to move to Raw Sienna. I'm just going to start in the middle of his forehead, which is one of the darkest points on his face. Just use very small flickering movements with your brush here, just so you can still see the unbleached titanium underneath. It's not opaque. Don't overload with paint. Just use the barest minimum to create this effect. Just be careful around the eye area. You want to keep that quite pale. Concentrate the darker fur into the centre of his forehead. Just build your layers up very gradually. You'll find that art is a real game of patience. But as I'm putting this next layer of fur on, I'm just going to go and fast forward to the next part. Okay, that's the Raw Sienna layer down. As you might have noticed halfway through that fast forwarded part, I decided that the Raw Sienna on its own was a bit much, so I went over again, toning it down by mixing the colour with a bit of the Unbleached Titanium, which gave me the tone I was aiming for. Now I'm going to move on to the final layer of his fur using the Burnt Umber colour. Always make sure that when you're layering up your colours, the previous layer is dry, otherwise you'll find that when you're painting over the top of it, the paintbrush can lift off the previous layer back down to the rock. That is of course unless you're actually aiming to blend your colours together. Okay, I'm just going to start down here on the lower half of his body. Just always use, again, very light flickery movements. You don't want to go for an opaque look here, you need the fur effect. If you need to blend, then use the tip of your finger, it's perfectly alright, it's quite effective actually. I'm just going to fill in his hip here. When painting, always be very careful never to just draw a line, always suggest it, as you can see. If I was writing, I would give the instruction, show, don't tell. It's not quite so important with such a cartoony picture as this, but if you were going for realism, never ever just simply draw a line. always suggest it with good shadow and light techniques. Moving up to his face now, I'm just putting the last layer onto his forehead, again keeping the eyes clear, just filling in his cheek. Always be aware of where your light is coming from. Here the light is coming from your left for this picture, so you want more depth on the right than you do on the left. The coloration on the left hand side will need to be more lifted. And I'm just going to fast forward to the next part. Now the fur is basically in, we're going to move on to the eyes. I'm moving over to my brush, which is a size 4 round, and it's got quite a fine tip, which I'm trying to keep that way. With the eyes, I'm going to start with raw sienna. It's the palest colour tone in his eyes. Never go for the darkest colour first. You need to build up your layers so you get that feeling of transparency. Now once my raw sienna layer is dry, I'm now going to add the next layer, for which I'm going to use burnt umber. Always take your time, don't rush things, just go as carefully as you can. Eyes are always the most important thing on any subject. Moving on to the pupils, I'm going to use Mars Black. Always make sure your eyes are level. Now that the eyes are basically in, I'm shifting to titanium white. I'm using this just to give his face some lift around the eyes and to put the shine in his eyes, just to bring them to life. Again, you need to remember where your light is coming from here. It's coming from the left, so you will need to put more of a highlight in his left eye than you do his right. Moving on from the eyes now, I'm going to keep with my titanium white, and I'm just going to pick out all the highlights in his fur. As I go along, you will see what a difference it makes. Our rabbit is coming together. Now that he's down, I'm going to move on to the outlining, which is a distinctive style of Beatrix Potter's paintings. I'm keeping with my size 4 round brush. Again, be very careful how you load your brush here. You don't want too much and you don't want too little. Too little and it's not going to go down smoothly, but too much and your line is going to come out too thick. You want a very, very fine line here, so the gentlest of strokes as you go over your rock. Now that the outlining is complete, you can see what a difference that has made to the entire picture. Keeping with my number 4 brush, I'm going to move on to his trademark blue jacket. I'm going to start out by using light blue. I'm keeping with my number 4 brush because, but being the jacket, it doesn't have any fur texture. You can keep your movements very smooth here, so it won't fray your brush quite as much as doing the fur texture technique will do. Now we've got the base coat of the light blue down, you can move to titanium white again. We're just using this to create a highlight here, just to give it a bit of lift so that it's not so flat. You want to make it look like he's lifting off the rock. While I was doing the jacket, I've painted over the lines a bit, so I'm just going to pop these back in now, doing the creases in his elbows and the folds in his jacket. Now what I'm going to do is take a bit of cobalt blue and add it to the light blue and titanium white, just to give a little bit more tone to the jacket itself. You might want to add a little bit more of this darker tone to the right side of Peter here, because as you remember, your light is coming from the left hand side So you want your right hand side a little bit deeper than the left. Okay, the iconic blue jacket is done. Now what I'm going to do, just to add further life to his body, is take some titanium white and continue doing some highlights, particularly down his belly and over the hip area. As I said before, you're defining the lines of his body here without just simply drawing them on. You are suggesting them through light and shadow. Adding his shoes in now, I'm just using burnt umber. Remember to leave a little highlight in the middle. This is of course before he loses his shoes to Mr. McGregor's scarecrow. We've done as much as we can to the main character for now, so having done his shoes, let's move on to the background and give him something to stand upon. I'm going to make a start with the grass, and for this I'm going to use brilliant yellow green mixed with the titanium white. You don't want to go mad with the background, just keep it very faint here because you don't want to take the main focus off your character. As I go on with the grass, I'm going to move over onto a broad bladed brush, and I'm going to be using a number 6 filbert. You'll find using a broad bladed brush makes this job go a lot faster. Be careful when doing your background, you're not actually just flat painting around your character such as this. Guide your line and then flip your paint back out so it looks like a continuous background behind your character. You don't want to create a line around because that just takes away from the realism. Just going to switch to my left hand. You can just turn your rock as you need, but with me filming I can't touch my rock because my cameraman will slap me. So I'm going to switch over to my left hand to do the details on the other side of the rock without blocking your vision. So we've got our base coat now. So now we need to add a bit more tone and depth, and I'm going to add a deeper green which is called Hooker's Green. Again with a deeper tone, remember where your light is coming from, I will keep harping on about that. So you want to use more of the Hooker's Green on the right hand side than you will on the left. As we did with the fur, just keep building your layers up and up, and don't be afraid to get your fingers in there if you need to. Now that I've done the grass, I'm just going to go over and retouch up my lines. But as I've now got black on my brush, I'm going to take this opportunity to go over and add more detail onto the main body of Peter himself. Never waste your paint, don't be afraid to go back and do random bits if you've got that particular colour on your brush at that time. Okay, final touch. As you can see, there's not much in the background at the moment beyond the grass, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some foxgloves. When drawing your flowers in, just bear in mind the scale here. Peter's a rabbit and a baby rabbit at that, so he's going to be very small in relation to these foxgloves. But then on the flip side of the coin, Peter is quite well into the foreground and these foxgloves are behind him quite a way. So in the end, make them at about an equal height to balance out those two factors. Just drawing the leaves in now. As you can see, they're quite tear-shaped, which matches well with the shape of your brush, so use that to your advantage. Remember, your tools are your ally. Adding shade to the leaves, I've used a mixture of Hooker's Green and Mars Black. Again, remember where your light is coming from. You want the shadow of the leaves down on your right hand side. Just using some white highlight here, like I did before, to bring everything out. Using my fine tip brush again, I'm going to just add a little bit of a black outline to these foxgloves. You don't want it as strong as it is on Peter, but just enough to make them stand out from the grass. to give the plants a little bit more of a presence. Mix black with some water and just give them a little bit of a light shadow underneath. Moving on to the flowers themselves, I'm going to do pink foxgloves. So what I'm going to use here is some portrait pink. Foxgloves are quite a bell shape, so start with a little circle at the bottom and then add a trumpet shape behind that little circle. I'm just going to paint these in and then add the details later. As you get further up the stem, the flowers are going to get smaller and turn into buds that haven't opened yet. So just use small dots with the tip of your brush and you'll find that's quite effective. Now we have the general base coat and the outline of where each individual flower is going to be. For the centre of each flower, I'm going to use a crimson hued paint. And I'm going to add this just using a simple dotting motion. Now we come to one of the fiddliest parts of the painting, which is just giving the tips of the flowers a slight outline. You want to be very, very fine here. If you load your brush with black paint and you're not too sure you've got the right amount on, test your brush on a larger part of the painting and use it there until you feel you've got the right consistency on the end of your brush to go to the fine detail. Now we have our bunny, we have our background. You can sit back, relax and just put in your finishing touches. Keep going until you are completely happy with your painting. What I'm going to do now is just add a few more highlights, a couple more details. Just going to add the whiskers here because where is a bunny without his whiskers? When drawing curves like this, a technique I've found really helps is using my wrist as a pivot point like a compass. And there we have him, Peter Rabbit on his way to Mr. McGregor's garden, or whatever rock hunt is in your local area. Thank you very much for watching my video, I really hope you've enjoyed it. The links to all the materials I've used for this painting can be found in the description below. If you have any questions or requests for future paintings, please let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video and don't want to miss out on future paintings, please subscribe to my channel and hopefully I'll see you all next week.